So for prompt 3, I chose to do standardized testing. So there's different sides. There's positive and a negative side to standardized testing. So the positives of standardized testing that I found would be that it can be digital or it can be on paper. And this would be students can take a test on a paper and pencil like we used to all the time before, computers, the digital age became, a big thing. Or they can have the option to take it on their computer. Um, for example, like when I took the GACE, it was digital, but when I took the ACT and SAT in high school, it was still pencil paper. And digital tools are available to use when taking the test online. Um, so those would be like a calculator, they would be like a cross off tool, a flagging tool, a highlighter tool, and I had those when I took the GACE. And then you could also have those when you do paper pencil, but you have to do it yourself. Like there's not a tool. Another positive is that it creates a universal standard for everyone. It makes it like more fair. The student standards are all the same at every school. So teachers are all teaching the same content. Um, and another positive is it can help teachers know how to better teach and help their students. So after the test results come back, a teacher could see what students were most successful at and what they needed to reteach more based off of the results, which would be for next year. For like digital or on paper, unlike paper tests, computer-based tests have interactive simulation tools on questions that students are unable to use, which includes rulers, calculators, zoom-in features, the option to eliminate question answers, and further. These interactive tool simulations are also very helpful towards students with accommodations and disabilities that find it harder to test on paper. While paper testing is still a good choice and the norm for students, change can be just as beneficial, and computer based tests should continue to grow throughout the educational communities and provide students with new opportunities. And I found that on a website, and I'll, link it at the end on my Works Cited page. So this allows testing to be more accessible for everyone, and students may be more engaged on the digital version of the test, especially this generation of students. A universal standard that is fair. So the objective of standardized is to set a baseline for comparison. Any form of assessment outside of school curricula, which might vary considerably within different education departments, can help a school system compare students from varied backgrounds because all the students took the same test. It becomes easier to evaluate and score individuals when they are measured against a common standard, and I'll link that citation as well at the end. This allows schools easier ways to measure the success of their students. This creates equality for everyone, no matter where they are from or where they move to. Um, it helps teachers know how to better teach and help a student. So the idea of having a standard measure for students seems simple. It allows educators to pinpoint student weaknesses and strengths based on the area being tested. This helps teachers differentiate their teaching strategies to help students achieve success. They provide teachers with information about what concepts students understand at their level and which ones they don't. This helps the teacher plan future lessons accordingly, and I'll link that at the Works Cited page as well. Teachers can use the data that they collect from the test to see what areas they need to find a new way to teach the topic. And they could use this data to group students according to their level, so for differentiation a little bit. The negatives of standardized testing is there's no differentiation. Every standardized test has the same type of questions for every student. There are not different levels for the different leveled learners. It takes it takes away teachers' creativity. Teachers feel like they have to teach to the test and not how or what they want to teach. There's unnecessary amounts of stress added to students and teachers. So it's putting pressure on the students and teachers to pass this one test to determine the amount of information learned, and that causes stress that shouldn't be present. Learning should not feel pressured, but should be allowed to let the students should be let their knowledge shine and show all that the teacher has taught them. It causes students' behavior to worsen. If students are so focused on testing, they may get antsy and rowdy. It doesn't show whether a student really knows the content, just if they memorized it. So it's not accurate in showing what a student knows at the end of the year. So students may not really show what they've learned because they were too busy trying to memorize specific things that they will need to know for the test. Unnecessary amounts of stress. So an article states the effects of standardized testing on students' education is that putting so much pressure and high stakes on this one test puts unneeded stress on them and could cause them not to do well. I'll link that at the end of the PowerPoint. If students are stressed out, they're not going to be as confident when they take that test, and this will make them not do their best. So we need to try and make students confident in themselves and their knowledge instead of stressing the test. So it doesn't really show what a student knows. Standardized testing doesn't show what a student really knows. And the article that I found says standardized testing doesn't really show whether or not students know the topic because they don't test them using differentiation in their testing methods. The standardized tests mainly only care to know if students know reading, writing, and math. It doesn't put as much emphasis on science, social studies, and electives, and I'll link that at the end. Standardized testing is not a good factor on if student grasps the content because the test can only have so many things on it. Question-wise, they don't cover all the material students have learned. It's not a good determining factor of what that student has learned that entire school year. It doesn't show what a student really knows. Students memorize the content in order to try to be prepared for this test. An article I found says students tend to memorize rather than internalize classroom instruction, and they also take several practice tests just to have a clearer idea of the questions that might be asked in the test. As a result, students may place more focus on the exam rather than learning, and they're probably going to get more stressed because of that. I'll link that later. Students don't showcase their knowledge on a test because they're just trying to remember the correct answers to the questions to pass that test. It's like rote memory. They're not showcasing their knowledge that they've actually learned. They're not applying their knowledge. There's no differentiation. So the standardized tests are all the same. And an article I found says that standardized tests do not differentiate and accommodate to each student's learning needs. The tests are all the same, which sounds fair at first, but really isn't when we have students who have accommodations that need to be met. I'll link that later. Not having different versions of a test and accommodating to the specific learning needs of students is a big disservice to them because they're not given the opportunity to show what they truly know. And we have different level learners in our classroom, and we group them by certain ways. And this test does not do that. So what we're teaching them throughout the year and doing throughout the year isn't correlating to this test. So the test should show what we do during the year. So bad behavior. Students' behavior is also affected by standardized testing. And an article I found, it says, for the most important week of high-stakes testing, students are 26 percentage points less likely to get in trouble than on regular school days. And I'll link that later. So when the students are so focused on that test, they didn't have as much free time to act up and get in trouble. Students were stressed about the test, so that's all that was going on in their head. So this test made them so stressed out that they couldn't think clearly, and that's not what we need our students to be doing. So teachers teach to the test. They feel like they have more pressure put on them when it comes to the standardized testing. An article I found, it says the effects of standardized testing on teachers, that have pressure put on them for their students to do good. So it makes them teach to the test instead of diving deep into other curriculums. When teachers feel like they have to teach to the test, they don't feel like they have as much freedom to be fun and creative when they lesson plan because they're worried about that test. A lot of teachers don't agree with the Common Core standards. The standardized testing is over. Another article I found, it says many people dislike the Common Core Standards Initiative, argue that too much time is spent preparing students for the test instead of making sure they actually learn and understand the material so they could apply that knowledge, later in their life. I'll link those links later. If the teachers are having to worry about the test, then they can't be as attentive to the students and what they actually know or what they need to work on. The teachers may be pressured by the administrators to raise the test scores. I'll link that later. So, teachers who are expected to raise their test scores may feel like they're on probation. They have to watch their every move. It doesn't allow them to be carefree and focus on what the students actually know. It's almost like you're walking on eggshells, and if you don't do well, you're going to get in trouble. So, you are going to teach more to the test because you need your students to do well, not only for them to, be recognized, but for you to be recognized. So why? Standardized testing is considered to be challenging because many people have varied opinions on standardized testing. Testing in schools shows student progress, teacher successes, and gives the school data. Each party involved has different opinions or ideas about what standardized testing should be. Standardized tests are challenging because they don't let students showcase their knowledge in multiple ways. According to an article, standardized tests reduce the richness of human experience and human learning to a number of set numbers. This is dehumanizing. A student may have a deep knowledge of a particular subject, but receive no acknowledgement for it because his or her test score may have been low. If the student were able to draw a picture, lead a group discussion, or create a hands-on project, he or she could show that knowledge, but not in a standardized testing room. Tough luck. I'll link that later. Example of this would be if a student who struggled with their test-taking skills did not do good on the test, but when they were provided the option of making a project to present or writing and drawing about certain topics, they excelled. So having only that one way to take the test and not different ways to showcase your learning is not fair to the students because there are people who are not good at taking tests. And I know that. I wasn't good at it, but when I was asked to do a project, I could get a project out and do really well in a project. So there's different viewpoints. The parent, they could feel pressured and overwhelmed by this. A student, they could feel anxious, nervous, pressured. They could have a sense of accomplishment if they do well, or embarrassment if they don't do well. A teacher could be stressed. She could be overwhelmed. And then the school, if their kids do good, they could be proud. They feel responsible for the scores that their students get. So why is this issue prevalent in the classroom or school system? So this issue is prevalent in the school system and in the classroom by how, starting in third grade, students have to take an end-of-the-year state assessment, which the teachers, students, parents, and schools have to prepare for. The tests don't provide diversity for all students. Different people learn in various different ways. According to an article, standardized tests don't value diversity. There are a wide range of differences in the people who take standardized tests. They have different cultural backgrounds, different levels of proficiency in the English language, different learning and thinking styles, different family backgrounds, different past experiences. And yet, the standardized test treats them as if they are all identical to the group that took the test several years ago, into which the test has been normed, the original group, which would be the norm group, against which any future test takers are to be compared. I'll link that later. So, when the students take the test and they're not differentiated, it is a disservice to the students because they're not able to showcase their knowledge. because they're limited based on their test taking skills and whatever questions happen to be on that test. There could be a whole unit that's not put onto the test that they might have excelled in that unit, and they don't get to showcase that. Summary. So I have helped others better understand this challenge. I use this information to help others better understand the different views of standardized testing. By discussing both the positives and the negatives of standardized testing, it is important to understand that there is always more than one side to an issue. I've used this information to impact student learning and success by when I'm teaching, I am making sure to stress the importance of learning to learn, not just memorizing things. We will practice the concept learned every so often. That way, students actually know the content and not just memorizing it. This will set my students up for success, and I use this information through a training led with my school by learning about how to help prepare for a test by using data from the year before. At the training, we were told that it was good to use the previous year's data to reflect on our teaching skills. And here's our works cited page for all of the citations and quotes that I found in different articles I found online. So thank you so much.